Liebe Community, herzlich willkommen hier zu einem weiteren Gespräch auf meinem Kanal. Ich befinde mich immer noch in dem wunderschönen Sankt Petersburg und hier ist mir gerade ein in den USA sehr bekannter Gast über den Weg gelaufen. Den werde ich jetzt gleich auf Englisch interviewen. Ich kann euch jetzt noch nicht versprechen, ob wir auch es schaffen werden, arrangieren können, dass es Untertitel am Ende geben wird. Deswegen muss ich mich jetzt schon entschuldigen. Das Interview wird nämlich selbstverständlich auf Englisch sein. Ich werde jetzt einmal auf Englisch umstellen und wünsche euch jetzt ganz viel Spaß beim Schauen des Interviews. So I welcome my today's guest, the former intelligence officer of the CIA, Larry Johnson. Hello, Larry.
Hi there.
It's a pleasure having you here today on my show, and I was really surprised meeting you here in Russia, whilst your friend and the famous analyst Scott Ritter was denied traveling to Russia. So I was kind of surprised meeting you here today. And what's your impression? We are here on the Sankt Petersburg Economic Forum. We've got more than 70,000 participants from over 33 countries. What are your impressions? What do you think of the forum?
It is a symptom of the decline of the West. The fact that you're here as a German, I'm here as an American. We're a minority. Yeah. There are hardly any of us here. And so the West has deluded itself, pretending that Russia is some, as John McCain famously said, a gas station masquerading as a country. Well, nothing could be further from the truth. Fact of the matter is, Russia right now, measured in gross domestic product, in terms of purchasing power parity, the PPP, has a larger economy than Germany, which I think many Germans would find shocking. The top four economies are China, the United States, India, and Russia. Three of those four are now part of the BRICS, which this event, the International Economic Forum, is really sort of a cornerstone event, just like the cornerstone in the foundation of a building. It is the cornerstone upon which a new world economic order is going to be erected. And the fact that the United States is not here and pretends that this is unimportant, that this is irrelevant, is just one more example of the narcissism that infects the United States. It's complete disrespect, not only of the Russians, of the Russian government, the Russian people, but the people of China, the people of India, and the global South. The reality is we're witnessing the transformation of the old world economy that was dominated by the United States into something that's very new, and that Russia and China are leading the way in establishing a new world economic order, and the United States may very well find itself on the outside looking in. Because what is it that the United States manufactures now? Rainbow fashions for the gay and lesbian community? Mm-hmm. Not a lot of demand for that in the world. Mm-hmm. They become the money center in terms of financial deals, but when it comes to actually manufacturing products, things that people want to buy and need, the United States is falling way behind.
Gefällt dir dieses Interview und die Inhalte auf meinem Kanal? Dann kannst du mich ganz einfach unterstützen, indem du mir ein Abo schenkst, dieses Gespräch mit all deinen Freunden und Bekannten teilst und einen Kommentar für den Algorithmus dalässt. Und jetzt ganz viel Spaß beim weiteren Schauen des Interviews. You know, I was yesterday at a panel with some famous German journalists, and I was kind of surprised that there was almost no one at the panel. And right beside of it, there was another panel with participants from the BRICS states, mm-hmm. and it was so crowded. You know, there wasn't a single free space. So I think what we can see here is the end of the era of unipolar world and the beginning of a new multipolar world.
Right.
Would you agree on that, right?
Oh, no, absolutely.
Yeah.
In fact, I was talking with a journalist from Turkey. And here's Turkey that for, 30, 40 years has been trying to get into the European Union.
Yeah.
And the European Union keeps telling the Turks, you're not good enough, you're not smart enough, you're too foreign. And they keep rejecting them.
Mm-hmm.
And they've gotten away with it because they pretended that they're like the only country club or golf club in town. There's no other club, so we're the only ones you can be a member of, and we're not going to have you.
Mm.
Well, now BRICS exists, and the Turks are going, let's join the BRICS. And the difference is the Russian people are not conditioned by history to treat other countries as slaves or colonial subjects. Whereas Germany, France, England, Italy, Spain, all the main countries, the Netherlands, even Denmark, they've all held colonies overseas. They've all treated people from other continents, whether it's Africa or Asia, as subjects, as inferiors, or as in German Untermenschen, right?
Yeah.
Whereas the Russians don't have that in their cultural heritage. In fact, the Russians have sometimes always been the ones being attacked or exploited. So what you get when you deal with Russia is you get treated as an equal. You get treated as somebody who's worth listening to, not as somebody that they're just patronizing you to say, okay, we'll pay attention to the president of Bolivia because we have to. But at the end of the day, the Russians don't say, oh, there's this nice little man, this little brown person, and pat them on the head. They deal with them as adults. And the people from these other countries, they sense that. They understand what it is like to be truly respected. So that's what they find here at the International Economic Forum, respect.
I can totally confirm that, as I arrived in Russia for the first time in my life just 3 days ago. I was a bit worried that Russians could be like not treat me in a friendly way because of the German government and because of statements like from our so-called foreign minister, who said we need to destroy the Russian economy. Wir müssen she said, wir müssen die russische Wirtschaft ruinieren, to destroy the Russian economy. And I was then surprised to see how respectful people are treating me. I just met someone from Russia, just a young journalist, and she was even fluent in German.
Oh.
So how do they welcome you as an American?
Oh, it's very welcoming. That's the Russian people are smart enough that they draw the distinction between the citizens of a country and the government. They recognize that governments don't always reflect what are the people themselves, and so it's very very welcoming and it's very warm. It is it's an enjoyable culture.
Absolutely.
I spent a lot of time in Central and South America, and I found the people there to be very generous and open. And I always described the Slavic people as being like they're Latinos, except they live in a cold climate.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah. The only thing I was wondering that I had to, or all of us had to do a PCR test.
Yes.
To attend it, and as well, like the panel discussions are mostly about digital transformation, about artificial intelligence, on fighting climate change. So it sounds for me a bit like the WEF agenda, Davos agenda. So that's my question to you. What's the difference between Davos and St. Petersburg?
Well, I think the International Economic Forum does face, let's call it a potential of the subversion of the West to embrace the so-called climate change agenda. I mean, just think about the language. The language itself is stupid. Climate change? Duh, it's a dynamic system. A dynamic system is not static. It changes. And the history of the world reflects the fact that we've gone through cold periods, we've gone through warm periods. What we're faced now in this modern age, and it goes back to the narcissism, that we are so important and so powerful that we can control the climate. Yeah, you control the sun, control the moon. No, you can't. And it's that failure in this, it's under what I call, they dress it up as science, but it's not real science. It violates the very fundamental principle of science where you can ask questions and challenge the conventional wisdom. Instead, it's expected like a religion. You must embrace it. If you don't embrace climate change, you're some sort of Neanderthal or backward person. And while we're at it, also recognize that there's transgender. There's no such thing as biological male and biological female. There is. You can be whatever you want. Claim to be a tomato or a potato. I'm a vegetable.
Yeah. A German potato.
Yeah. So a Kartoffel.
A Kartoffel, exactly.
So what we're living in an age where the Western influence is basically in denial of science, where the West sort of in the Middle Ages was the dawn of science, modern science, but it has now perverted it to the point that it's asking people to embrace things that really defy common sense and logic. And we've created an environment that if you try to comment on that or challenge it, well, you're immediately some sort of Neanderthal. And so we live with the mythology that, oh, electric vehicles are so much better. And yet when you look at how the batteries, the lithium, the elements that are mined to make electric vehicles, they're exploiting black Africans to create these vehicles. They're exploiting child labor to create those vehicles. And yet it's the wealthy liberals that pat themselves on the back and say, oh, aren't we doing a great thing for the environment? I mean, in my view, excuse my language, but it's such bullshit.
But why on earth are so many panels as well, like being about fighting climate change, decarbonization, but as well here in St. Petersburg? Do you have an explanation on this?
No, it's just, it's to that extent that, if you will, the BRICS countries are still a little bit subject to the Western propaganda and have bought into it. One of these days, and we've started to see it in some countries, it's like the country of Angola. They passed a law about regulating the ability of homosexual groups to try to encroach upon traditional family values. And immediately the United States wants to impose sanctions on them. I'm glad Angola turned back to the United States and said, mind your own damn business. This is our people. These are our families. We will take care of ourselves. We don't need you in the United States lecturing us.
Yeah.
Where that is, and it's that colonial mentality that we're superior. We know better than you. We can tell you what to do because you're uneducated, you're poor, you're black, your skin color is darker than ours. And it's, again, it's a lie. That's, again, in my view, Russia's strength. They're not saddled with that colonial history. They're freed from that. But it's still, you can still see elements of it here at the International Economic Forum.
Exactly, yeah. But only elements.
Elements.
It's not the same ideology, right? It's different. And yeah, let's talk about also the geopolitical shifts that are taking place in the moment. And there is the Russian President Putin, just maybe 50 or 100 meters away from us. He was just holding a speech here. Right. Have you seen the speech?
Yes. You know, he was talking in depth about the Russian economy and recognizing that the Russian economy it's doing things. It recognizes, one, we have to build up the Russian people. We have to create economic opportunities for the Russian people. We have to create incentives for people to have more children. We want to create incentives to build strong families. But we also recognize that we want to have partnerships with countries around the world. But not partnerships that are based on exploitation. Partnerships that are based upon mutual respect. And, you know, candidly, what the United States, one of its principal reasons for its animus towards Russia is it wants to break up Russia. It wants to carve it up into pieces so that the United States can take it like locusts, like invading aliens from another planet. There was that movie several years ago called Independence Day, where the aliens surrounded the Earth, and the president he asked the one alien, "What is it that you want?" The alien said, "That you die." Well, that alien is Joe Biden. Okay, that's what he wants. He wants Russia to die, and the odd thing is,
will he succeed at the end?
No. But the odd thing is, he doesn't care if he drags Germany down the toilet, too. That if he drags Germany... Already, look at what's happened to Germany with the blowing up of the Nord Stream pipeline. The German economy has contracted. The German people are paying more for utilities, for electrical energy.
Would you call us the most stupid puppet of the U.S.?
Yeah, I got to say, I don't know what happened to the Germans. Because when I was with State Department back in 1990, 91, 92, so we're talking 32 years ago, I found the Germans much more independent and assertive back then. Now they have become like a French poodle, you know, a dog that is, if the United States tells it to roll over, it rolls over. Frankly, if I was German, I'd be embarrassed.
Yeah. And you know, we are the country from the so-called Dichter und Denker, the country of Hegel, of Immanuel Kant. So we were used to have a brain. We have a bright history. Yeah. And but let's get back into the geopolitical shifts that are taking place. Just last week, the Western states, or some of them, have declared that the Ukraine is being allowed to attack Russian territory. Even Chancellor Scholz allowed them to use German weapons to attack Russian territory. What does this mean for the war?
Well, it means the potential that Europe's going to get involved in an actual conflict with Russia and will lose again. But not just Germany. You know, during the Second World War, it was, you know, Germany in a remarkable way was able to fight both the Soviet Union and the West and came close to prevailing. But it was the Soviets that fought, you know, 80% of the Wehrmacht during that period. The West has now embarked on this inevitable, they feel that they must have a conflict with Russia. And they've not learned anything from history. So you go back to 1812, where Napoleon invades Russia, wins the Battle of Borodino outside of Moscow, but it was a Pyrrhic victory. It was a victory in which he lost so many troops, and they lost their ability to sustain combat operations. Well, lo and behold, here we are now, more than 212 years later. And once again, what we're witnessing is the West has so extended its logistics lines, what they call lines of communication, that it can't provide enough tanks. It's not making, neither Germany, nor France, nor England, nor the United States are making tanks to keep pace with what Russia's making. In fact, Russia in 1 month makes as many tanks as all of NATO combined in a year. So if you're going to get involved with warfare, you have to have an industrial base that can sustain it. Up until 2 years ago, the number one country in Europe for an industrial base is Germany. And yet what has happened in the ensuing 2 years? Germany is losing major industries that are relocating to other countries, including the United States. And with that loss of industrial capability, you lose jobs. You lose, and so people with no jobs, they're not able to go out and spend money in restaurants and in other businesses. So you're witnessing the start of the contraction of the German economy. It used to be, Germany was the example of Europe for industrial capability. And now that's shrinking. So we're at a stage where, despite all of the harsh rhetoric from the West about fighting Russia, they really can't deliver the actual weapons to carry it out. It's almost like they're paying lip service to it. The concern, though, is in the last week, both comments by Vladimir Putin, comments by Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov, comments by Deputy Foreign Minister Sergei Ryabkov have all made it very clear that Russia's not going to be a punching bag, that Russia's not going to sit by and allow the West to attack it, that Russia will respond. And areas where Russia could respond, as an example, they could arm the groups in Syria that the United States has been trying to fight as a part of its effort to overthrow the government of Syria. So arm those groups with weapons that could reach U.S. military bases and kill U.S. Military personnel. Or they could actually give new weapons to the Houthis.
Yeah.
Already we've seen the Houthis by themselves have withstood the United States Navy and actually a coalition of NATO forces for more than 6 months. If the United States can't defeat the Houthis, in what planet do they live where they believe that they could defeat the Russians or the Chinese at the same time? It's fantasy. It's delusional. This is an example, I come back to the narcissistic personality. The narcissist looks in the mirror and says, I am the best looking. I am the smartest. I am the strongest. But the actual picture shows an old fat guy that can barely get out of his chair. But he's deluded himself into believing that he's still some young virile athlete, and he's not. And that's where the West is right now. They talk a big game, but they can't sustain an army in the field probably for more than 2 or 3 weeks.
I attended a panel discussion, another panel discussion today with some Chinese businessmen. And there was one businessman who said, we came to stay. And there's a certain spirit of optimism here, as we call it in German, Aufbruchstimmung. So how do you see the relations between Russia and China? Will they be the leading power in the future?
Yeah. That's been one of the surprising developments out of Russia's special military operation. So from 1972 until February 2023, so you're talking 51 years. During that 51-year period, the objective of U.S. foreign policy was to keep to keep Russia and China separate, to try to create conflict between them, to divide them, to keep them from working together. Because there was a recognition that if Russia and China come together, then you've created a monster, something that's more powerful than the United States. So let's give Joe Biden credit for something.
At least.
At least
One success.
He has made the world a better place by bringing together the union of Russia and China. And I know from some they're intelligent people in the United States, but they still view this as, they don't take it as a serious relationship. They see Russia is weak and China is the dominant power. Well, let's look at facts. The Russians can produce their own commercial jetliner. They don't need to rely on a single import from North America or from France or anywhere in Europe. They can produce their own airliners. Chinese can't. Up to this point, the Chinese have been relying upon Boeing. Now the Chinese can say, we'll look to Russia. And the Russian, they can get the parts they need from Russia. And then all of a sudden, Russia and China with a massive industrial capability, can now start churning out aircraft where they don't have to depend for one thing on the West. And the West has been, they've tried to use terrorism. Let's call it what it is. It's economic terrorism to threaten China and to threaten Russia. And they don't just do it. They do it to India. They do it to countries around the world. And countries around the world are saying, we're tired of this. We're not going to be treated as, be threatened, be bullied, where you're going to take our money, that you're going to seize it and just take our money because you can, because we were stupid enough to put our dollars in your banks. No. We're changing that. That's what's starting to change. And the United States doesn't recognize that fully. I mean, the vast majority of people. There are some in government that do. And I think they're scared to death.
Gefällt dir dieses Interview und die Inhalte auf meinem Kanal? Dann kannst du mich ganz einfach unterstützen, indem du mir ein Abo schenkst, dieses Gespräch mit all deinen Freunden und Bekannten teilst und einen Kommentar für den Algorithmus dalässt. Und jetzt ganz viel Spaß beim weiteren Schauen des Interviews. So, talking about terrorism, you had been working for the CIA for 4 years, and now we had this huge terror attack on Crocus City Hall in March in Russia, and there are some voices, especially in Russia, who are claiming that the US is behind this attack. How do you see it?
I don't know if the United States was directly behind it. I think we can build a case that the United States at least was indirectly behind it, or more importantly, the Brits. But it was clearly carried out by the Ukrainians. What I don't know with any certainty is whether the Ukrainians did it. You know, they've had the relationship with U.S. and British intelligence, extensive relationships. If they sought permission or got a green light to do it, what I am certain of is it was done by the Ukrainians, and that they paid for it. Whether or not the money came from the West, it's possible. I don't rule it out as a possibility. The one thing that's certain is the United States could bring an end to this war tomorrow by telling Ukraine, okay, this is done. We're not providing you with any more weapons.
You've been talking about Nazism, Nazismus in German. There's one famous narcissist called Donald Trump. And he once said that he could end this war within 24 hours if he should be re-elected by the end of the year. Would Trump end this war within 24 hours?
He'll try. Let's look at the positive. You're correct that Trump is a narcissist, but he actually has an element of realism about him. He is not completely delusional. His narcissism is wrapped up in his desire to be liked. But I do know from multiple sources, not just one, who have dealt with people that have worked for Trump as an airline pilot, as a valet, and Trump, to his credit, does not treat workers as if they're inferior. He treats them as persons. And so that's his one strength. The problem he faces is if he tries to negotiate an end to the war, there's the element of the deep state, the establishment in the United States, going to attack him because they want to keep the war going. The war is great for the United States. It's making companies money, lots of money. And that's the one thing I think most of the world doesn't understand when you look at the history of the United States over the last 70 years. I mean, go back to Korea, and then to Vietnam, and then to all these other third world dust-ups, whether it was Panama or Libya or Iraq or Syria or Afghanistan. The United States has never paid the price of war. Now, in your own country, in Germany,
we did.
The German people paid a terrible price, a terrible price. I'm not sure what percentage died, out of, I know the statistics for Russia as an example. If you take 100 people, out of 100 people, 16 Russians died. By comparison, the United States, if you took 100 people in World War II, if you total up everybody who died in the Pacific, died fighting in Europe against the Nazis or in Africa, you would get one person and take 20% of them. So just cut one leg off. That's what the United States suffered. That's nothing. That's the trauma that's caused by saying, my great-grandfather, my great-grandmother, the ones that died in bombings, Allied bombings of Germany, were, hundreds of thousands, at least 800, 900,000 German citizens were killed in the Allied bombings, which had no strategic purpose other than to terrorize the German citizens. And then the number of German soldiers that died, particularly on the Eastern Front. Here's the United States that's constantly involved with wars, and all those wars do is make money for corporations. They get wealthy. They don't get impoverished. They don't suffer. And certainly their children are not the ones who are going to war. They send the kids of poor families, middle-class families.
This is this kind of colonial attitude
Absolutely.
that you described before, right?
Yeah.
So colonialism still exists, right?
Yes. They just don't call it that. We don't call them oligarchs. We call them capitalists, entrepreneurs.
Entrepreneurship. Here we talk about oligarchs.
Yeah. They're
In the
oligarchs.
US we talk about entrepreneurs.
Yeah, they're oligarchs.
Yeah. But let's get back to Donald Trump, because if he should be re-elected, how would this change the relation between Russia on the one side and the US on the other side?
I believe that Trump would try to have an adult relationship.
Based on mutual respect?
Yes. Ultimately, he's about cutting deals, but he believes that in cutting those deals, it's going to make, again, you appeal to the narcissistic side of him, that he gets to be the peacemaker. But, again, to his credit, when he reached out to North Korea during his presidency, he didn't go try to humiliate the Korean leader. He would try to have a positive relationship with Vladimir Putin and with Xi Jinping.
That's basically the nightmare of American mainstream media.
Yes,
A good relation with Russia and China.
It would cut the heart out of Lockheed Martin and General Dynamics and Raytheon, who are counting up on war. Because they've been growing continuously over the last 40 years. And for what? The world's not at more peace. And, again, I don't mean to be so harsh, to be such a harsh critic of my country. But for God's sake, I can step back. I can see what's going on. And I don't like it. Because I've also seen... I sit on the board of a charity that's called Combat Soldiers Recovery, And this, what happens is, if you're an American soldier that's wounded, where you lose an arm or a leg or traumatic brain injury or your vision, if you think that the U.S. government takes care of them, you'd be wrong. A lot of times they're left on their own. They get some minimal medical care, but then when you're looking at things that are life-changing events, they're left to themselves. But the members of Congress, their kids aren't the ones suffering and dying or being wounded. And the members of the major corporations, their children aren't the ones suffering, dying, being wounded. So it's all those poor people. And it's very much, it reminds me very much of the French royal class just before the French Revolution in 1780-85, where the French elite were sending off the poor to fight wars, and they weren't paying a price.
So it's again, they are those arrogant and as well, superficial attitudes. They don't care about other people and other nations. But let's get back to the relations between the US and China, because there are some experts as well in your countries, such as Scott Ritter, for example, who are saying that the final opponent of the US empire, is China.
Yeah, it's insanity.
Do you agree on that?
No. I think one of the big critics of U.S. policy with respect to Ukraine has been John Mearsheimer, and I agree with him. But then he turns around and talks about, we got to worry about China. Okay, let's run the list. How many countries have China invaded in the last 45 years? One country, Vietnam. And that's because Vietnam was invading Cambodia, and China was allied with Cambodia, so China was involved with that as a military adventure. How many colonies did China establish in Africa? 0. How many colonies did China establish in South America? 0. How many colonies did China establish in Asia, invading its neighbors and taking them over? None. And yet we create this mythology, the Chinese, they're out to conquer and take over the world. Meanwhile, it's the United States that is establishing military bases around the world. It's the United States which is trying to limit where people can travel, where they can sell their ships, and what they can do. I mean, the hypocrisy of it is staggering. And my attitude is the United States needs to learn to mind its own damn business. And people say, you're an isolationist. Well, if learning to stay at home and not meddle in destroying other countries, overthrowing other countries, letting other countries figure things out. Now, am I arguing that China's a perfect country where everything's great? No. Let the Chinese figure it out. You don't want to be that guy on the street where you're constantly going into your neighbors' homes telling them how to fix their marriages, how to raise their kids, what they ought to do with their yards. Because if you're that guy, your neighbors are going to hate you and they'll probably kill you.
Yeah, exactly.
Right?
Yeah, absolutely.
That's the United States.
Yeah.
Mind your own business. Make your own house clean and neat.
Yeah.
Make your own house safe.
Yeah.
Then maybe if other neighbors see it and say, we want to be like that, we'll go over and talk to them. Fine. If they come to you for advice, great.
Yeah.
But don't be the meddlesome mother-in-law where you're trying to tell everybody else what to do.
Larry, I got one last question for you. How is your outlook for the future? Are you an optimist? Are you a pessimist? Or are you a realist?
I like to think I'm a realist, but there's an element of optimism in light of what Russia, China, and the BRICS countries are doing. This has started a movement that I think the West is going to be incapable of stopping. The negative side to it is that there will be enormous suffering in the West, in Germany, in France, in England, in the United States. There's going to be potential economic devastation. It's going to be out of that suffering, though, that the countries may come to their senses and say, hey, we have to change how we deal and interact with these other countries. We can't continue to be the bully. We can't continue to compel people. We must encourage people. We must have equal partnerships. I don't think that Russia and China, in presenting that message, are being cynical to try to manipulate people. I think they are genuine. And I think the other countries recognize it's a genuine gesture by Russia and China. And so the irony is, I think Russia and China are leading the way into a future that offers more hope for the world, not less.
That's a clear statement. Larry, thanks for your time. Thanks for this spontaneous interview. We just met 2 hours ago, and now we're sitting here doing this interview. Thank you so much, and all the best for you as well on your flight back to the US. I hope they let you in.
Me too. Thank you, Flavio.
Ja, und auch an euch, liebe Community. Schön, dass ihr hier heute wieder mit dabei wart. Ich hoffe, euch hat das Interview gefallen. Ihr konntet dem Gespräch gut folgen. Und jetzt wünsche ich euch noch einen schönen Tag und schicke euch ganz herzliche Grüße aus Sankt Petersburg. Bis zum nächsten Gespräch hier auf meinem Kanal. Ciao.